everyone, and welcome to A Balancing Act, the podcast devoted to helping families navigate memory loss and dementia. I'm Kelly Burtonshaw. Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. Today, I want to talk about a situation that can feel confusing for families and individuals alike. Someone begins to notice that their memory feels different. Maybe they're struggling a little more to find the right words, or they lose their train of thought more often, find it harder to concentrate. Now, they know themselves well enough to recognize that something isn't quite the same. But when they mention it, the people around them will say things like, "You seem fine," or "This happens to everyone." But the concerns just don't go away. Eventually, they bring it up with their doctor. The doctor completes a cognitive screening, maybe even more extensive testing, and the results come back normal. So now what? If all this sounds familiar to you, you may be experiencing something researchers call subjective cognitive decline, or SCD. My goals today are to talk about what that means, why it can happen, and most importantly, what you can do when something just doesn't feel quite right. What does subjective cognitive decline really mean? One of the first questions that people ask when they begin noticing changes with their memory is, "Do I have Alzheimer's disease?" It's an understandable question, but it's usually the wrong place to start, because changes in memory don't all mean the same thing. Occasional forgetfulness and word-finding issues are normal as we age, but there is such fear surrounding Alzheimer's that many people find it hard to not worry about what is going on. Before we can talk about what might be causing those changes, it helps to understand how healthcare providers describe them. The first distinction is something between something you notice and something we can measure. Just like we talked about in the intro, a person may notice that their memory feels different, but the cognitive testing doesn't identify measurable or objective change, and that's why it's called subjective. The experience is very real, even though the testing remains within normal limits. And then there are some times when both the individual and testing identify cognitive changes. That's called a mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. Daily life is often still fairly independent, but there is now objective evidence that the brain isn't functioning the way it once did. Dementia is altogether different again. At this point, cognitive testing indicates significant change, enough to interfere with everyday life and independence. But here's something that is also so important to understand. These aren't necessarily steps that everyone moves through. Sometimes noticeable memory problems never develop into a mild cognitive impairment, and some people with those mild cognitive impairments never develop dementia. That's why getting a diagnosis as soon as possible matters. The goal isn't simply to put a label on what's happening. It's to understand why the changes are occurring, because that's what determines whether they may improve, remain stable, or require ongoing monitoring. Before we continue, if you're finding these conversations helpful, I'd like to ask you a small favor. Please take a moment to follow or subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss future episodes. You can also join the conversation on Facebook, where I share additional resources, updates, and support for families navigating memory loss. And if you'd like to help keep this podcast going, you can support the show through my Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Most importantly, thank you for spending time with me today and for being part of this community. Now, let's get back to the episode. Why does memory change? As we've been talking about Yes, the biggest misconception about memory change is that it always points toward dementia. In reality, the brain doesn't work in isolation. Now, while changes in memory or thinking might be reflective of things going on in the brain, it might also be reflective of what's happening throughout the rest of the body as well, which means there are many different physical conditions that affect our brain. Some of those things might include the effects of aging, changes in sleep pattern, depression, stress, hearing loss, the effects of medication, illness or infection, substance abuse, or other medical conditions. Any of these can make thinking feel less efficient. And in many cases, those changes improve once the underlying cause is identified and treated. But we also cannot rule out thinking and memory changes related to a specific brain disease. That's why healthcare providers know to look beyond memory itself. They're trying to understand the whole picture rather than focusing on one symptom. They want to know when the changes began, whether they're becoming more noticeable, and what else might be affecting brain function. I think of it like the check engine light in your car. When the light comes on, it tells you something deserves attention, but it doesn't tell you what's causing the problem. Memory concerns work very much the same way. That's what evaluation is designed to uncover. Noticing a change shouldn't immediately create fear, but it also shouldn't be dismissed. It's simply your brain's way of telling you that there's something worth understanding. What are the next steps? Your role isn't to diagnose yourself. It's simply to notice what's changing and be willing to start that conversation. And remember, no one can predict the future. What's important is that you keep asking questions to understand well enough what's happening today in order to make thoughtful and informed decisions about tomorrow. Reaching out for answers is always more helpful than wondering and worrying in silence. And if you're caring for someone else, the same idea applies. You don't have to convince yourself that something is seriously wrong before asking for help. You also don't have to dismiss your concerns simply because testing might have come back normal. Trust what you've been observing and invite someone else into the conversation. The most important step isn't having the answer. It's asking the questions. At the beginning of today's episode, I asked what happens when your memory feels different, but testing is normal. I hope you can see now that a normal test doesn't necessarily end the conversation, just as noticing a change doesn't automatically mean dementia. Those two things can exist at the same time, and understanding that allows us to respond with curiosity instead of fear. The good news is that you don't have to figure this out alone, and you don't have to have any answers before asking for help. Speaking of help, I hope that you will consider me part of your support team as you're looking for answers. You can message me anytime at our Facebook page. The link is in the show notes. And if you know of someone who might benefit from the information presented in this episode, please feel free to share away. And no matter where you are in this process, give yourself this grace. No one is perfect at this. No one. You're doing the best you can. You're doing it from a place of love. And that is enough. I'm Kelly Burtonshaw, and it was my pleasure spending time with you today. Please keep in touch.
Hi, I'm Peggy Wright, editor and producer of this podcast. We know that juggling your loved one's care while trying to manage your own life can truly become a balancing act. We want to help you as you navigate this journey by offering our support. You can reach out to us anytime by going to our Facebook page to ask questions, leave comments for Kelly, or talk with her one-on-one by setting up a chat. The link is in the show notes. And you can find us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please take a moment to rate and review so we can continue to provide relevant content. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for listening today.